All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Tailored Psyche. This is episode 2, and I did come up with a name after episode 1, so now I'm all official. But this time around, I get to have the distinct pleasure of talking with Michaella Reif, who is a longtime friend of my girlfriend, Sarah, but I get the pleasure of talking much more in depth with her on a much more public venue today. Michaella has a very impressive background in biochemistry and German, very worldly, multifaceted education, and also has just completed medical school, which is a massive accomplishment, and is now going to her first choice residency in the fall in Wisconsin, at the University of Wisconsin. So I've known Michaella for a little while now, and the reason in particular that I wanted to chat with Michaella today, it's not only the fact that she's in medicine during the most crazy public health pandemic in the world, but also because, as you'll see in this interview, Michaella is such a thoughtful person, thoughtful, calm, and caring person, that she epitomizes what you would want in terms of bedside manner in medical care, in my opinion. And so hopefully through this conversation, you'll get to know Michaella a lot better and be able to connect with her beyond this interview, if you'd like.
That was so nice.
Well,
You need
it's
to
true.
come around like on rounds with me when I see patients and say,
Yeah, exactly. Before you enter the exam room, I'll go in and be like, just to let you know, you're about to talk to Dr. Reif, and she's amazing. I'll just go through that whole list.
yeah, I could use that instead
Yeah.
of being like, who are you and why are you here?
Well, it's true. I mean,
Thank you so much.
yeah. I mean, it's true. The last time you were out here visiting, and we unofficially determined that you and I have the same Enneagram personality type.
Mhm.
So it's definitely that vibe that people get from you of just like, you're very calm, you're very grounded, and you're very thoughtful, because your intelligence definitely comes through in conversation too. So
I
that's
certainly
why.
hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's strange. I think you and I sort of bonded really quickly because obviously through Sarah, I've seen pictures of you and just I've known a little bit about you for a long time. But I don't know, we connected kind of instantly when we
Yeah.
were driving around. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I had the lucky opportunity of driving Michaella back from her residency interview out here at the University of Utah. Sorry for them that they didn't get you, but yeah, we immediately chatted about lots of deep things, which was part of the motivation why I wanted to like reconnect with you now in this luckily more public sphere. So,
Yep.
yeah, if you don't mind, I want to ask kind of like the elephant in the room. And just curious, you're now in healthcare. You've been in med school forever. Now that med school ends, quarantine begins, the global pandemic. So be honest with me, how many friends and parents and family members and people are reaching out to you asking about all of this?
Yeah, I always feel kind of awkward when it happens. Excuse me. I actually just had a old boss. So I did 2 years of research before medical school. I'm at the University of Massachusetts, and one of my old mentors, who I haven't spoken to in 2 or 3 years, texted me this week asking if everything was okay. And I always feel a little bit strange because I'm not doing anything right now. I'm not in the hospital. I'm not seeing patients. I'm really not contributing in any sort of way except just by staying home and trying to keep everyone safe that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so many people have reached out, very concerned for me, and I have to be like, thanks, I appreciate it, but
Uh-huh.
your concern can be elsewhere for sure. It's sort of a strange time just because, I'm at the end of my medical school career and I have all of these skill sets now, and I don't have my degree yet. It's coming in a week and a half at this point, 2 weeks or something. But I have all of the knowledge and skill set for that degree. Everything's done. And yet
Right.
this huge thing is happening and I'm not involved, which is, it's a strange time to be where I am in my career.
Sure.
Yeah.
Totally, like this middle ground. And so
Yeah.
that's interesting. If I'm hearing you right, people are more reaching out thinking that you are already like in the trenches, making
Mm-hmm.
sure you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Are people reaching out thinking that like you are the resident expert in their lives on all things medicine?
That too. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Lots of people reaching out for like small injuries and things that are happening at home that maybe they should be seeing an actual doctor in an actual place for. That's usually how I start my unofficial, consult. I say maybe you should go see someone in
Yeah.
person. But yeah, lots of people are reaching out for just, you know, normal medical things. Like everyone's talking about coronavirus right now, but other things are happening as well. People get sick for other reasons. So people want advice on that. And additionally, a lot of people have um, opinions or, they want to run by research or articles that they've seen and just see what my opinion is, which
Hmm.
is fun. It helps keep me on top of my game too.
Okay.
So I can comment a little bit more uh, from a better place, a place of better understanding
Sure.
when I ask
Sure.
those types of questions.
And so how do I want to word this? I mean, how do you feel when people reach out to you, and especially if they have like injuries or little illnesses or things like that, just to ask you some kind of question about it? Because the context of it is like, I work in mental health and you're
Mhm.
going into medicine too. So I get a ton of people whenever they hear that I work in mental health who would love to just tell me their whole rigmarole story, or they tell the story of like a friend of theirs or their kid or something that's going on and want me to give a free consult right
Yep.
there.
Yep.
So what's that like for you?
I always joke with my parents that it's $5 for every question.
That's a good idea.
Which I think if you look at resident salaries, it's probably asking way too much.
Yeah,
But
yeah, you're the most expensive resident then.
I don't know, it's strange. Something has shifted this year. I think the first couple years of med school, you're just so excited to be in it, to start having all this knowledge. So when people would reach out before, I would sort of like do research on the side as I was like answering questions. So I sounded more smart or, so I didn't give them bad advice. It's just kind of like a fun game because I could be like, I'm not a doctor, like I'm just learning, or, someone told me this in class the other day.
Sure.
But now at the end of my education, and at this point, I consider myself a physician, even if I don't technically have the degree for another couple of days. I have a job lined up for the next 3 years as a resident. And the pressure is definitely on when people ask those questions now, because it's not just like you're not just asking a student, you're asking someone who's about to be answering these questions in real time with real people.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
And
do you feel more pressure in that case then?
absolutely a lot more pressure. And I mean, what some people don't understand about medicine is you never stop learning. Your training is never really done. So yeah, I've gone through 4 years of medical school, but there's so much I don't know, and that's okay. Like, no one's supposed to know everything. That's why we have residency and fellowship, etc. So some questions people have been asking me are kind of reminding me that I still have big gaps in my knowledge, but it's good because I know how at least to teach myself these things. So
Funny.
yeah.
Yeah. Believe me, I get that. I get that. In the mental health world, I'm you're never done learning for sure. And there's so many things that people ask. They're like, yeah, I've heard of that. Maybe I know some things about it. But then you realize like, oh, well, that's not what I'm specialized in. So it's kind of like you have to toe that line between like what kind of pressure should you actually take on and
Yep.
what pressure shouldn't you, especially because you're not charging these people.
Exactly. And I think my motivation to be in medicine, I mean, it's the typical cliche, like I just want to help people. And I have a way more deeply spiritual response to why I went into medicine too. But overall, like I want to help people. So if someone's coming to me with a question, I can do my best to try to answer it. But it's definitely, you know, now I have this name and I have this degree, I have this whole profession that's sort of behind me that I'm sort of defending with everything that I say to people. So yeah, the
Oh
pressure is
yeah.
definitely there, but the motivation is still what it always has been. So I don't think I've
Yeah.
stopped myself from giving free advice.
Sure. Well, you're also very kind and considerate too. So when people seek you out for help, it's hard to say no.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
My
how
cousin's
do you, oh,
actually
go
a
ahead.
dermatologist, and I think they get probably the worst of it because everyone's just like, oh, I can just send you a picture of this weird thing on my skin. Can you just
Nice.
Thankfully, I
Yeah.
don't have any of that.
Yeah. Luckily, you're going into internal medicine, so
Mhm.
nobody can take pictures of that
I
and
mean,
send it to you.
they do, but yeah.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
It's
Gross.
all
Now, before I ask you about internal medicine,
Mhm.
you just bring up a really interesting point about how you have your own very personal reasons for going into healthcare, and but you're also defending a long-standing industry, obviously,
Mhm.
that has a lot, and the industry itself has just so many pressures and stigmas built into it on every level, whether on the practitioner level or on the patient level. And I imagine that a lot of the mental health or physical health issues that medical practitioners experience is trying to find that balance between like their reason for being in the field and the pressures of that field to begin with.
Yes.
Do you
Yeah.
kind of have a sense, even though you're in the middle zone where you're about to really fully go into it,
Mhm.
how you might be able to kind of toe that line or find that balance for yourself?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that. I always hope that I always keep that internal motivation despite the fact that you actually use the perfect word that this industry can sometimes prevent people from fully realizing um, that motivation that brought them there in the first place.
Mm,
And I would actually, I wouldn't consider medicine, at least for me, an industry. I think it's an art, it's a profession, it's a calling for most of us that unfortunately we now have a sort of scaffold industry built around that's trying to contain it, so
mm,
that more people can access it, but also so that more people can take advantage of it too.
wow.
So I think you're right that what brings us, most of us, to this profession is something way bigger than just the hospital or even just the day-to-day work. It's something, like I said, very deeply spiritual.
Hmm.
um, it, I'm not jaded yet, but I've seen so many people become jaded. There's lots of Instagram accounts that I follow where residents just sort of complain about how terrible things are and how they've sort of lost the art of medicine in the industry. So I hope that at least now, coming from a place of optimism and sort of armed with the knowledge that it happens to so many people, then perhaps I can, find ways to keep that for myself
Mm.
once I'm actually in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope so too, for sure. And it's scary. Like, obviously, you've heard the news too of like how this is affecting healthcare workers, which is
Yeah.
just terrifying. And I know one of the most profound lessons I learned in mental health is that we are human also.
Hmm.
And like you and I are very privileged to be on the side of healthcare that we are. But
Yes.
there's so many ways and so many other possible eventualities that could have landed us as the patient.
Yep.
So we're so privileged to be in this position, especially when you find it a calling. You
Yes.
call it a calling. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure you empathize and sympathize so hard for those who are like doing so much that they can, but it's burning them out.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
I think empathy is the big word there. I think, part of it is that I've trained in Baltimore, so I've seen this really wide breadth of socioeconomic diversity, of racial diversity. Um, and you have to sort of, I mean, for me, it comes kind of naturally being able to empathize with pretty much everyone, which is, in my opinion, one of my biggest strengths and also one of my biggest weaknesses. Um,
Mhm.
but it goes back to what you said, where you could have so easily been that person who's in the hospital bed. Um, I actually applied to medical school 2 years before I got in and was unsuccessful. And I keep thinking back to that now. Like, I could be a second year resident, who knows where,
Oh
You know, if things
yeah.
had gone differently, I could have been in the midst of it right now.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and who knows, like, what kind of exposures I would have had. I think about, you know, the colleagues that I've worked with over the course of 4 years here at University of Maryland, who are in the thick of it right now. It could so easily be any one of us. And that just comes back to the fact that, you know, this is a collective thing that we're all going through. It could have been anyone can get sick. I could still get sick. I'm still
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
taking care of these patients when I'm an actual doctor in a couple months. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's wild to think about. And if we go down the spirituality route, that's wild. Like everything happens for a reason, that you
Mm-hmm.
didn't get in then, so you wouldn't actually be in the hospital right now
Yes.
during all this. That's wild.
I have a lot of things that, you know, I wouldn't have met my partner if I'd gone to medical school when I first applied. I mean, I don't know if I would have ended up in Baltimore. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where I would have been. My life would have been completely different.
Yeah,
It's really crazy to think about.
yeah, absolutely. And then so because of the fact that life happened the way it happened,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're during this transitional moment is when all the pandemic is happening. I imagine, of course, that it makes you a little nervous, just of like, okay, this is like the atmosphere, this is the climate that you're entering into.
Yeah.
But what are you learning? Like you said, like you're staying informed, you're obviously like preparing, your residency will happen, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you feel like you are learning that will kind of like bolster you when you start in the fall?
I mean, I think obviously the science of COVID itself, I have to learn the minutia of that, which is difficult to do from afar because I think it varies from institution to institution.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not something that we ever learned in medical school. I think when we talked about coronavirus in the past, they were like, oh, this causes like respiratory syndromes, but you'll never see it. It's like, you know, SARS, MERS. They're like, don't worry about it. We didn't have to study it for the test.
What?
Yeah, we
That's
knew it
funny.
existed. It's part of our respiratory virus panel.
Uh-huh.
Coronavirus, like in general, not the specific one. But yeah,
Right. Well, you
so
need to call your professor. Be like, why don't we talk more about this? See what happens.
they're probably all kicking themselves now for just that.
Yeah, they're all stuck at home, regretting it.
It is. It's just hard because medicine operates under a standard of care. There's a certain way that we're expected to do things. And we learn that in med school, mostly in third and fourth year when we're in the hospitals. We learn what the most appropriate way to manage certain diseases, what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it's really strange because there is no standard of care and it's on such a wide scale. So it's one thing if you have a patient come in with a rare disease that no one can figure out and everyone sits down, puts their head together, which is my favorite part of internal medicine. So I'm getting
Okay.
excited just thinking about the idea of rounding at a table. um,
Nice.
but you know, usually there's like this back and forth discussion. We try different things. Um, we come up with a list of possibilities of what could, you know, what could kill the patient, what's going to prevent the patient from going home. And in this case, we have this large scale group of patients that we just don't know how to manage. A lot of it is so much guesswork.
Mm.
So going into that, I think what I'm trying to teach myself now is not just the minutia of that, but just something I've been working on for the past 4 years in medical school is just being comfortable with the unknown
Mm.
and knowing that sometimes it's enough just to be there trying something and that it's
Right.
okay to not be an expert. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways of being in medical school is, you know, sometimes the exact right answer is, I'm sorry, I don't know, I'll get back to you, or I'm sorry, I don't know, the whole world doesn't know. So,
Yeah, especially now. It's a very
especially.
valid answer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you brought that up because that could be a nice long rabbit hole for us. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, two pieces to that. I agree with that last part that you shared in that, especially in mental health too, one of the most profound things that you can do, especially when I've worked with kids in the past, is tell them, I don't actually know. Let's
Mm-hmm.
go find out the answer together. So it tells the kid that it's actually okay to not know things.
Yeah.
and it models how to go find help or find the answer.
Exactly. I think it's something that I don't think anyone has ever really taught me up until medical school, which is a really huge disadvantage for our society. I mean, if you're seeing children in the mental health field who already struggle with this idea that they need to know everything, and if they don't, there's something wrong. I mean, I think that's sort of a big underlying reason of why we as a society are struggling so hard with this COVID situation. People are constantly sharing all these articles like, oh, now they know this, like, oh, look, this medicine works, oh, like these are the exact numbers of deaths in this particular place. It's just information overload to try to fill this giant void that is the fact that we don't know what's going on.
Yes.
And I think medical professionals and health professionals in general are just a little bit more comfortable with the idea that there are times when we are incredibly uncertain, but society as a whole is looking for more answers.
Right.
I wish that, I don't know, I wish there was some sort of training or something in our education system or something where people were just a little bit more okay with that.
Well, maybe you and I can create some kind of program.
There you go.
Med students.
You can focus on the children because that's
Perfect. You got it.
going into
You're
adult.
so right. You're so right, though. I mean, I know firsthand, I'm lucky that I don't have to go to the doctors very often, but when I do, it's like, because something random has come up that in my mind is a super annoying thing, and I just want you to tell me the answer. And so, yeah, I totally get that. So it's good to know at least that in the field, there's an understanding amongst practitioners, despite their ability level, that there's a very high possibility that they don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I think that even that, like if we ended the interview right there, even that is a helpful insight for a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. Just drop the mic on that. Just for a lot of people to come in, because everybody's going into the doctors with something that's wrong. So they're nervous about it. They're scared of it. Something's unfamiliar. And so I think it's definitely helpful for people to hear that even though you're in a moment of crisis, the doctor may not have the answer right away for you.
Yep.
I think now.
That's a burden and a gift of the profession. I'd imagine that you feel the same way about being in the mental health field, that I don't know, the metaphor of a shepherd just came to me, but I don't really know if I like that. Essentially, you're trying to, you're guiding someone through a really difficult moment. You're guiding someone through that uncertainty. And I think because we learn to be uncomfortable with it, we're sort of the experts in that uncertainty, so we can provide better guidance. If it's, just a simple, what is this weird thing on my arm and it's probably not going to kill you, like I can guide you through that uncertain question. But we also have the harder conversations, those harder moments, when we're dealing with patients who are in the ICU or advanced cancer patients or things like that.
Right.
Yeah,
I think what you're talking about is such a ubiquitous topic, especially these days, because like everybody that I'm in touch with, either on social media or clients who are coming in, the biggest thing that I'm hearing is, they're nervous and uncertain about themselves. They're nervous and uncertain about their future. They're nervous and uncertain about like how they can actually help the world or contribute. But the common denominator about all of those things, all of those stresses, is uncertainty.
Yep.
So it's, like I said before, it is, I like the way that you described it. It's kind of like a burden and the gift in the medical field. And I think it just serves to reiterate your point that medical professionals too are just as uncertain sometimes, even though they're the ones who are trying to help you with any of your medical uncertainties.
I think, as a society, we're still just we're limited in what we know. And I think just because of health professionals, our advanced training, because we're exposed to so much. And that's the best part of this job that I'm going into, is you get to see this incredible breadth and depth of humanity. We
Mm-hmm.
get all these little data points. We have so much information, and it's still not everything. We know that there's a limit there. Whereas,
Right.
anyone else who, that sounds a little elitist to say, but I mean, anyone else in any other profession doesn't necessarily have all of those data points, and they think there must be like a finite amount of knowledge that you have access to, and that's it. Everything exists in this little bubble, but it's completely, it's infinite. And I
Absolutely.
think, yeah, being comfortable with that it's a huge challenge, but yeah, it's exciting. It also means that I'll never get to stop learning, and yeah.
Right. And I wonder, you are just starting your medical career, um, but kind of jumping ahead to a question I would normally ask later in the conversation. If someone was just getting out of undergrad right now,
Mhm.
and they were talking to you because they're psyched to go into medical school, what would be the advice that you would give them? Kind of like the life advice of just how to stay personally successful.
Yeah, actually, my sister-in-law is one of those people. So I've been
Ah,
talking to her.
perfect. So you have your answer prepared. Good.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, first of all, I would say if you're going straight from undergrad, I wouldn't do it. I think even though I tried to go that route myself, the trend is to sort of take a year or two and experience the world before immersing yourself in this.
Mm.
So I definitely recommend taking time off. But people who are already going into medical school, I think there's a lot of talk, and especially from the leadership in medical schools, there's a lot of talk telling people to never lose themselves. And that sort of comes with the assumption that you're entering medical school already knowing who you are,
Uh,
which was a hard place for me to be in. My first years of medical school, I really struggled with, I sort of had an identity crisis, I think. Um, Granted, I was also in a new city. My relationship was still pretty new. There were a lot of just like new things happening in my life. But then there's also this pressure where people are saying, don't lose yourself. If you have hobbies, stick with your hobbies, get into an exercise routine. Like it's sort of this sort of mandated structured wellness, which
mm,
has always just really irked me, because it felt more like a job. It felt like there was something else that I was not doing right.
sure.
If that sounds, if I don't know if that is making any sense. Um, so I guess my advice would be to, even if people are telling you to stay true to yourself, recognize that you're not done yet. Like there's still a lot. Med school is going to change you. First of all, med school will like break you in a million ways. You're going to be so much stronger for it,
Hmm.
and so much of a better physician, a better human, if you just recognize that you're still growing and you have this incredible opportunity to grow within this field of medicine, that it, like I said, exposes you to so much. It
Yeah.
really challenges your ability as a human to empathize, to sympathize, to communicate. Um, and obviously you do need to stay true to you, but also be flexible in what that definition is.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Love that. I
thanks.
love that. Yeah. Obviously, that rings true because that's the majority of my work, working with clients on figuring out who they are and what
Mhm.
their calling is, what their life purpose is. But man, you are so spot on with the fact that it never ends.
Yeah.
And being true to yourself is a great habit, but it's exactly that. It's a practice.
Yep.
And yeah, I talk a lot about how even once you get to know yourself, you're not done. Like
Yep.
now you have to use who you are for
Mhm.
something. That's where life purpose comes into it.
Yep.
So I love that because that growth mindset that you're talking about plays to the uncertainty piece too.
Mhm.
And that humility to remember that you're going into med school, you don't know who you are. And as you say, it's going to change you
Yep.
somehow. And you got to be open. You got to be flexible. You don't know what your interests are. You don't know what your specialization will be
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
how you're going to react when you see your first patient.
Yeah. I went I went into medical school thinking I was going to be a surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a huge part of my identity as a medical student. Was, I don't think my classmates thought of me as a gunner. I really hope not, because I did not get the grades to be considered a gunner. Um, but I sort of wanted to come across as this sort of strong, like, oh, this like woman in medicine who's going to be a surgeon, and badass, for lack of a better word. And I sort of kept that up for the longest time
Mm.
because I thought that's who I was. That's why I went into medical school. I wanted to work with my hands. I wanted a like a fast-paced, high acuity environment. It wasn't until my first day of my internal medicine rotation when I came home and I was like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. Like, that was the best day of my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it ended up being this really big kind of existential crisis where, all the books I had read about medicine, most of them were surgery based. My favorite TV show
Wow.
was Grey's Anatomy growing up, so like obviously, I wanted to be like a Christina Yang sort of situation. And
Sure.
yeah, so like I said, it just being open to the fact that you have no idea what life is going to throw your way and how that's going to change you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. My godfather was a pretty well acclaimed pediatrician,
Mhm.
and he loved telling me this story about how when he was doing his residencies and internships and externships and all that, he got to do a rotation on a Native American reservation,
Yeah.
and he loved that just for the diversity of it, for one thing. But he realized that he wanted to be a pediatrician that day, and this was pretty late in his med school rotations.
Hmm.
Whenever he picked up a clipboard and he saw that it was a child, like in their camp and in their clinic, he got so excited. And so I always remember that story in the same exact way that it hit you too.
Hmm. Yeah. It was a surprise for sure, but
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see why it would be kind of a crisis, because you had
yeah,
trained yourself already so much in surgery.
exactly. Well, you think of yourself in this way and you come in with these preconceived notions about what each specialty is, in the same way that you have preconceived notions about yourself and your classmates. So you sort of judge different specialties without really fully experiencing them. A lot of those stereotypes end up being somewhat true. But
Sure.
um, it's just funny because in hindsight, knowing, I think I'm just more self-aware now. We've talked a little bit about this. I feel like I'm going through a sort of spiritual journey myself, and that has a lot to do with me just understanding who I am authentically. Um, in hindsight, thinking back to me wanting to be a surgeon is kind of funny because medicine suits me so much more. Um,
Mm,
I truly enjoy talking with patients and being able to connect on a different level that's not just, cutting into tissue.
sure.
So it really, in hindsight, it makes no sense for me to be a surgeon whatsoever. And it's just strange that I went for so long thinking that that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
Mhm.
But hindsight is 2020 now that you recognize, oh, this is why I love this.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing, tell me about this. Has come up, the spiritual element has come up a couple of times already in the conversation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what's your standpoint or what's your personal experience, and how does that integrate with your extremely non spiritual scientific field?
I would argue it's very spiritual.
By all
I
means.
think that, so the fourth year of medical school is a little bit strange, in that most of it is spent just preparing and applying for residency. So we're not in the hospitals as much, which leaves a lot of downtime. Um, and so basically, this year started out with me in two very demanding rotations when I was in the ICU and when I was working on the floors. And I had a couple of patients that I'll never forget that just had really, really difficult medical problems. And I had the honor really of being the most consistent member of the team who's taking care of them, because people rotate through every week or so. Because I was on these rotations for a month and I happened to pick these patients up as someone to follow and try to manage on my own, I had the privilege of really knowing them and getting to know their families. And in that process, I think I got very deep into a couple of these patients' cases, which is something that can only happen if you're a medical student. Like there's this very small amount of time when you actually have time to sit and talk to patients and families. And I realized that one of my strengths and one of the things that I actually enjoy is sitting down and having those really, really difficult conversations, end of life care, things like that. And that sort of, I wouldn't say triggered, but it sort of just opened up my own mind into what my abilities are as a human, as a future doctor in this field. And that sort of brought me into this sort of spiritual place. And you and I have sort of talked about auras a little bit, and it sounds a little hokey. There are people out there, you can believe it or not, who are able to see auras, like different aura colors, and that sort of corresponds to their personality and who they present themselves to the world, how they interact with the world, the energy that they're putting out there. And I think what I've realized over the past year is that the energy I put out there and the way I experience the world is just so deeply empathic. And the more I've been thinking about it, thinking about my childhood, thinking about high school, which was really, really difficult for me, I realized that I was such a sensitive person because I feel things from everybody all the time.
Preach. Yeah.
And I don't think I've always had boundaries. And because I didn't realize what was happening when I was younger, it made things really difficult. But I think what's interesting about medicine is that in some ways the boundaries are completely gone, but in others it's a little bit more structured. It's almost like you have this sort of like this pathway, this channel. So you sit down with, the wife of a patient who's dying in the ICU, and you're in this very small room, and you're having this very structured conversation about how our care should proceed. So you have these sort of walls, but at the same time, you are opening yourself up so much to this one person, to this stranger, and they're opening themselves up to you. It's some sort of like portal. I don't know what it is exactly. Sure. It feels like there's like this really strong connection within the confines of medicine, within the confines of a hospital. And I think having those really difficult experiences early on in this year, and then having the time to reflect on them throughout the rest of fourth year, when mostly I was just kind of traveling for interviews, it sort of brought me to this place where I feel like I'm trying to explore my spirituality in terms of what does it mean to be an empath? You can think about it in more of a fun way in terms of like aura colors. Like there's some like psychic readers who see the aura colors and they always say that, these certain colors are empath colors. And that sort of allowed me to have a language to describe the way that I've been feeling, I think, my entire life. I don't know if that's all making sense. There's a lot of pieces that are all trying to come together.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So there's this one aura reader. She's very big on Instagram, and it's really fun for me. She basically, lays out what all the different colors are, and she's been able to see them since she was very little. I can't see auras. I wish I did. That'd be pretty cool. I actually do have family members who can feel auras, which is interesting, which makes me a little bit more of a believer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wish I had that superpower. But essentially, she gives like little personality quizzes and things, basically seeing like, are you an empath? And for me, it's like, yeah, definitely an empath. Like definitely need like all of this time by myself to process all of the things that I was absorbing throughout the entire day. Definitely need like the alone time, need the time to process. Also, I have difficulty being in like large settings, especially with lots of loud people, which is kind of funny if my partner, because He's a big loud person. uh, but anyways, I think, just sort of interacting with that type of thing on Instagram, websites, whatever, reading some different books has just, like I said, allowed me to have this language to describe these feelings that I've been having forever. It sort of has allowed my brain to organize what I think I've always known about myself and about other people intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
And this person, she happens to organize it in color. And because of that, like I sort of am starting to organize my own interactions in color as well, which is pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah. So you have like little guideposts now, just using different language.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. And that definitely did all make a lot of sense. I certainly can't sense auras, but I'm a very sensitive person myself. So I totally get what you mean. And now you use the word portal. I was definitely imagining it as like this channel, this like direct line of energetic connection with your patient.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely feel what you were describing, but what do you, as you have said, there's definitely, it's a gift and a curse aspect to that, because the true beautiful gift is that you can have these difficult conversations that so many doctors and healthcare professionals have a hard time having.
Yeah.
But what you said is also true, that you definitely need to find that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
So
Huge.
in your exploration, as you've just been reflecting and things, and you're not quite yet in full-time practice, what have you been thinking about in terms of how to keep yourself safe, how to protect yourself while still being able to provide at that extremely deep level for people?
I think it's something I'm still working on. Those two patients I was talking about definitely didn't have enough boundaries there. It still impacts me. I ended up going to a memorial for one of them at the insistence of one of my attending physicians. I think it's difficult. It's difficult because I think it's a lot of my strength of who I've been, at least as a medical student, and who I think I'll be as a doctor. So I think it's hard to know how much to dial that back and still maintain what I think is, my strongest suit of being able to connect with people on that really deep level. I guess I don't have an answer for that. I think one thing I do know, and I'm still sort of exploring this myself, is even though I'm such an empath and I'm so sensitive, there is a side to me that I think came out of middle school, high school, those years that I really struggled socially. That it's not as empathic, that is a little bit more cynical, that is a lot more logical, that is very much just like, nope, this is how it is. These are the boundaries here. So I know that I know I have that in me. And one of my parents is very much like that too. So I don't know if it's an innate thing or if it's a sort of learned behavior. I think knowing that there is that side somewhere will ultimately help me so that I can, experience these patient interactions, experience, like I said, the breadth and depth of humanity, but also go home, be able to watch Netflix, cook dinner, and not have mental breakdowns every day.
Yes. I think Gabby would appreciate that too.
Yeah. It was a tough year. It was a tough year for him because he's very much the opposite of me in that way, where he has lots of boundaries. He's like, no, like I don't want to hear what this say. And I'm jealous of him in some ways because of that. That he can just sort of turn it off and focus on him. So him trying to coach me and help me through some of these difficult experiences this year was probably not so fun for him.
That's what companionship is for, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I love it. I mean, you bring up what you just described about your own personal experience is what you were describing everybody going into medical school needs to think about. They need to know exactly what you're talking about, that you will have experiences during med school that will totally redefine your sense of identity, or totally shape how you interact with people. You'll recognize what your superpowers are.
Mm-hmm.
And just like every hero in every hero's journey in every superhero movie, when they realize their powers for the first time, they don't know how to use them.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to kind of like play around and figure out, okay, where's the limit? Where is it unhealthy? Is this for me? Is this for them? Am I burning out? Etc. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, and you bring up such a great point. And the reason, not many people know this, but the reason why I stuck with mental health was because in my first job, my first mental health job after college, I realized, certainly like I realized, okay, I'm actually kind of good at this because empathy again, but more importantly, I didn't take it home with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea that I'd be able to do that. I didn't know that I could just like go home and boop,
Yep.
turn it off completely for my day off or something. So you're exactly right that no matter what specialty people go into, you need to find that line, and you can
Mm-hmm.
flirt with it to kind of strengthen yourself and serve who you're serving. But you still got to protect yourself, especially in healthcare.
Mm-hmm. I like that you say you flirt with it a little. Yeah, you kind of you test the waters a little bit. It's
Yeah.
it's I don't know how to say this. I guess it to me empathy is something that exists within you, but it's also something that you have no control over. So I think, it kind of
Interesting.
exists as its own being. So I think the idea of flirting with it, it's like, can you like come a little bit closer? I'm just kidding, like maybe
Yeah,
don't get so
totally.
close to me. Yeah.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I like that. I've never thought of empathy as like this separate thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I do like that. And I mean, another rabbit hole that we can go down, you know that my mom died just recently, and I spoke with her about end of life stuff and death, and I spoke with her doctors just about death in general.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it ties to what you just said, that I learned from them that death is also this like separate thing that people think about,
Mm-hmm.
but you can still form a relationship with it.
Yep.
You can still get to know it. And just exactly like what you just did about empathy, you can flirt with it. You can get close to it. You can walk alongside it. But sometimes you're just like, I need a little bit more space.
Mm-hmm.
You get to define the relationship a little bit.
I love that. And I think you're in a unique position because you had that experience with your mom and also being in the mental health field. Like you have the ability to sort of explore that relationship more. Um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely at some point. I think we joked around about this. At some point I'll definitely write some kind of book about what I learned about death through all
Mm-hmm.
of this. Because death is another taboo, especially in the healthcare field too, with uncertainty and fears and things like that. So yeah,
I think
definitely a unique experience.
I've always faced it head on, and I just remembered that I actually played a character Death in my senior class
No
play.
way.
Huh,
Wow.
interesting. I think I've always sort of had a fascination with it. Um, I think that probably comes from, again, being a spiritual person, but also not a religious person. I wasn't brought up in the church or anything else. So I think it was always sort of a mystery to me as a kid that I explored, I don't know, through Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and, being out in nature and seeing like, you see dead birds as like a child. Like, I don't know. I think I've always just sort of had an interest in that other side. Um,
Sure.
which I guess culminated in me playing death in a senior class.
Well, or you playing death was the foreshadowing for how good you are at talking about end of life care.
I hope so. Yeah, maybe I'll go into palliative care or something like that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. I love connections like that. I love that you just thought of that
I
too.
know that's really funny.
Right. Um, and now, kind of like looping it back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
first, I just love your description of how using empathy in medicine and just like what it enables you to do. And it goes all the way back to how we started this conversation about how using that empathy to know yourself really well helps you remember and recommit to the art of why you're in medicine, of
Mm-hmm.
what your calling is. Right. So it's not just this big pressured industry behind you
Yeah.
you're trying to defend and you kind of lose yourself in. So you've had, I mean, you practice medicine in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and as you said, that you've seen quite a bit of diversity just in Baltimore
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so, segueing from the spiritual aspect that you just described, which is so beautifully applied to healthcare, how have your experiences, both in Africa as well as like with diverse populations here in the States, either contributed to or helped you kind of explore that side of yourself?
I think part of something I've been chasing since high school has been, it kind of comes back to this breadth and depth of humanity. I think I was so sheltered where I grew up, which you can't help but be sheltered where you grew up, this place in Massachusetts. Uh, as you know, it's New England. Yeah, I think I recognized early on that I was pretty limited in my own experiences. And I think I've always sort of been a know-it-all. And I didn't like that there were people experiencing things that I couldn't understand.
Oh.
Which I think is also why I love reading so much. I love novels. I love getting into other people's worlds. Um, so this sort of goes into like why I've pursued global health experiences and also training in Baltimore, which is complete. I don't think you could get anything that's more different from where I grew up than the city of Baltimore. Um, I mean, I think that's allowed me. I mean, if I say that my calling to medicine is to understand what it is to be a human, and it just so happens that I love the science aspect of it as well. It ties everything together nicely. I
Mm-hmm.
think, experiencing these diverse patient populations in these really diverse settings in the situation in Africa, very resource limited settings, which is a whole other topic, which is now unfortunately very relevant here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was ironic coming back from Zambia, and I left my N95s and my hand sanitizer there as
Uh-huh.
donations, and then came back a week later. I was like, well,
Like, oh shoot.
yeah, wish I brought some of those home with me.
Yeah, especially when you look on Amazon and a bottle of hand sanitizer is $1,000.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, I'm so glad I had the experience, and the timing of it is just, it could not have been more perfect because I don't think it could have happened any later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I think because I've chased these experiences, it's sort of, it's allowed me to really address that calling, that initial calling into medicine. I think even though I'm going to Wisconsin now, which is not nearly as diverse as Baltimore, although I don't think really anywhere is as diverse as Baltimore. Um, I think just knowing that I've had those pieces, that I've experienced that, and I've still been able to connect with people, that really the only shared experience that we have is that we're sitting in the same room right now. Other than that, your life is completely different than mine, but I'm still able to find common ground. I think having had those experiences, really, it holds me into that art of medicine, into that calling.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't find it humorous, like I'm making fun of you by any means, but I can feel the angstiness of that dichotomy between recognizing that your knowledge is limited
Mm-hmm.
while also being proud of the fact that you're a know-it-all.
Yeah,
I could just feel that tension grinding in between.
yeah, that's I don't know, the wheels that are keep grinding my life away. I don't know, they keep me going.
Yeah. It's perfect. Yeah, the fire that's created in the tension between those two things.
Yeah, keeps
Is
me
what,
moving.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that. Though. I love that. I love your description of how those experiences form this sort of like backdrop
Mm-hmm.
for the the stage in which you can practice that empathy and
Exactly.
practice those boundaries too, just because you have the biggest breadth of knowledge or bigger breadth of knowledge for you to kind of play with that. And I think that's so beautiful and so lucky for you to have that ability to sit down with anybody
Mm-hmm.
and just connect with them.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't take it for, I don't want it to come across that I take it for granted either. You know, it's not like a light switch, I don't think, where it's just all of a sudden like we're friends. It's if that were the case, like I said, high school would have been easier.
Oh my
But
gosh, for so many people, I'm sure.
no kidding. Yeah, I think I don't really know where I was going with that, I guess, but
You're just reminding me that you're humble.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't assume that I'm going to connect with everyone. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. When I go into a patient's room, I'm not just like, okay, like this is going to be great for them. Like it's really
You're like,
how
lucky
lucky are they?
them.
Michaela's here. After Taylor comes and introduces me,
Yes.
they're like, oh,
Oh, thank goodness.
I feel so connected. I think it still takes a lot of work. It's it's delicate. Those interactions are very delicate, and I think I happen to be able to pick up on those minutiae, those changes in conversations. And I again comes back to the diversity of experience I've had with so many patients at different reading levels, at different poverty levels, at people who speak different languages. One of my favorite patients was this really beautiful woman in Zambia, and not only did I not speak her language, but none of the local Zambian doctors spoke her specific local language.
Oh, wow.
And it was so cool to be able to connect with her. It's something I'm proud of, despite the fact that literally no one knew what she was saying, the poor thing, at least not on a logistic or a linguistic level. We were able to connect differently, but
oh, that's so cool.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in your case, but I think the power of experiences like that is made even more profound by the fact that you and I, like me and working in residential programs in the past or taking on a new client, and you stepping onto a new shift one day, we have no idea what we're going to get into.
Yeah.
We can rely on a lot of our skills and knowledge, of course, to keep us confident of being like, all right, here we go. But it's a forced humility.
Mm-hmm.
We never know what's going to happen. Even people who work corporate jobs have no clue what they're going to face that day.
I mean, it goes back again to just being comfortable with the unknown and the uncertainty, and just, I guess, being confident in your abilities and what you've already experienced, which is difficult in this COVID situation to really tie everything back, but
Sure.
because there are kind of limited experiences there. But I think, collectively, in an individual level, we know that we've gone through days where we had no idea what the day would turn out to be, and we've survived it so far, and things turned out okay. Yeah, just learning to be comfortable with that mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. That was such a perfect tie-up, so that's good. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yes,
I love that. Yeah, that's such a perfect wrap everything up in a bow moment. So my last question for you in this, going back to my godfather, who was the pediatrician, he did a lot of work with residents, like mentoring residents, and he hosted a party. Not party, it's not like a rager or anything, but a gathering with these residents at his home. He brought in this other doctor to speak, and it was just like a casual, like, get out of the hospital, let's just come here, talk about the field kind of thing. And the doctor who was speaking, when all of the residents were talking about how, like, how do you find work-life balance? How do you take care of yourself? Like, how do you hold on to your calling, like you're talking about? How do you hold on to the art of it? Because they were in the thick of it. This guy said, I can't answer that for you, but what I can ask you is, what is your definition of the good life? Because in medicine, in healthcare, even in fields like finance and other ones, really all that we're trying to do is promote the good life for people, or a good life for people.
Mhm.
And so this guy's point was, if you can define what a good life means, then that's your North Star for your patients, or for helping your patients.
I love that.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, because my godfather and I have talked a lot about that, and
Mhm.
like his answer is beautiful, and I've loved thinking about mine. But I want to ask you, since you're going into medicine, you're about to be a resident, what is your definition of the good life, or a good life?
Yeah, really putting me on the spot.
I know.
I just sound all eloquent on the fly here.
Take your time.
Because I've prepared for everything else, obviously.
Well, you're such a know-it-all. I figured I had to throw something at you.
There you go. I mean, I'm kind of torn between two things, which I think tie into each other pretty well. Um, I think the good life for me is if I'm living every day making some sort of meaningful connection,
Mm.
whether that's in my career or in my relationships. Um, I think probably because I went for so long with, like I said, the social anxiety thing and in high school, I think I was missing a lot of those connections. And so I've sort of been working towards that. And to me, even those really, really difficult days in medicine, I remember having, okay, that woman said that she really appreciated seeing me smile every day at her. That to me was like the small moment, took 5 seconds of my day. It was that small connection. And that's what I thought about when I went home that day.
Love
So yeah,
that.
I'm going to stick with, I like that answer. I think every day having some sort of meaningful connection with another human.
Oh, I love that. And especially, I'm sure it's safe to say that whatever that connection means for you,
Mm-hmm.
like whatever your unique version of that healthy connection is.
Yeah. And I think, you're in the mental health field. I'm sure pretty much every day you're having some sort of meaningful connection, even if it's not on your side. If you're talking to someone and they're experiencing this empathy for the first time, or they're opening up for the first time.
Sure.
Like, even if you didn't get as much out of that, I think there have been times when I know that just the fact that I was there listening to this patient, even if it wasn't particularly impactful for me, just knowing that I was there and I was able to make a difference, that's a huge motivator. That's a huge drive, a huge fulfillment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. One of the very first things I was taught, thank goodness it was early on in the mental health field, was that just your presence is enough of therapy. And I actually heard someone called it the flagpole effect, or the light post effect, that like someone can receive therapy and relief just by going up and talking to a lamppost.
Oh, really?
Just by talking it out. The whole point is, like, if you can be the lamppost for someone
Mm-hmm.
and not say anything, that's enough of therapy in itself sometimes. So just your presence and just your listening or just your smiling can have all the difference in the world.
I think my personal statement for residency, I almost said that verbatim, not the flagpole
No
thing.
way.
But I was like, I learned that my presence alone can be impactful and heal. It's something like that. So
Yeah, well, that's why we get along. I love that. And it's true. It's very true. So.
there's a Fall Out Boy song that has a lyric, I just want to be a footnote in someone else's happiness. And I think it's Fall Out Boy, like whatever, but like that was actually my first concert, Fall Out Boy, Blink-182, and Panic at the Disco.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's a loud concert.
yeah, I was like 17 too. I was really or really old for a first concert. Yeah, I love that line. I just want to be a footnote in someone else's happiness. Like, I think I don't necessarily need the spotlight. I'm not trying to save anybody, but just to be like a little data point that, push someone into a different direction, the
Yeah,
direction they want to go in. Yeah,
definitely.
it works for me.
Yeah. And I didn't, that's awesome, because like that's what I talked with Dan about in the last episode. The
Mhm.
legacy is like planting seeds that you won't get to see grow.
I love that metaphor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. I like the footnote metaphor. That, like, yeah, you're like this little footnote in their
Mm-hmm.
life story, and their
Exactly.
life story is going to keep going, but somehow your footnote made an impact.
Exactly.
I love that.
I love that too. See, all full circle.
All full circle. Perfect. Perfectly inclusive. Awesome. Well, for those of you watching and listening, if you want to get in touch with Michaella or get in touch with Michaella and me at the same time and ask more questions about what we've been talking about, I took a bunch of notes. I already know that more notes I'm going to have to take after this call is done because I didn't want the table to shake. But this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. I felt so honored that you asked. And if anyone has med school questions, I love advising people in terms of that. So feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I said in the very beginning, not only does she epitomize bedside manner for patients, but she also loves, as she just said, talking and teaching and being a resource for others. So if anybody's watching, don't hesitate to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Taylor.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks.